Hi, this is a 5-minute summary of Derek Parfit's Reasons and Persons. Yeah. So Reasons and Persons was published in 1984 by Derek Parfit, a British philosopher, in which he discussed ethics, rationality, and on the basis of personal identity. Now, it is divided into four parts. First of which argues that certain ethical theories are in fact self-defeating. For instance, ethical egoism, which is essentially the claim that to be ethical is to do whatever is best for oneself. Now, Derek claims that this sort of ethical stance is well, collectively self-defeating due to the prisoner's dilemma. However, he does not believe that this is sufficient ground to reject the theory. Um, However, ultimately, Parfit does reject common sense morality on, um, uh, but by his meta-ethical sort of outlook. Well, in the sense that, fun fact, Peter Singer actually studied under Derek Parfit when he was at Oxford. Well, so what happened was, Peter Singer, he was a sort of I wouldn't say an emotivist, but he was definitely an anti-realist metaethically. Now under Parfit, he changed to be similar to Parfit. He converted to being a universal prescriptivist. Wait, no, he was originally a universal prescriptivist. He converted to um what is it called? Objectivist sort of thing. Wait, let me. What's that? Universal perspectivism, prescriptivism. Um, right. So, non-naturalist normative objectivism. Right. So essentially, the claim that, well, I think this is Moore's claim, sort of, that, uh, you know, we have normative facts that are objectively true. Objective, I would use Michael Huemer's definition here, meaning agent independent, interest independent, and perspective independent um, truth. So that's objectivism. So normative objectivism is the stance, is the claim that there is in fact ethical truth. Truth in the sense we use in the everyday, it is true that well it is true that if A equals to A equals to A, or yeah, so that's a truth. Now, non-naturalism essentially means that the notions of good and bad, and sometimes obligatory, impermissible and permissible. Well, these concepts cannot be reduced, well, in naturalist terms, right? They cannot be reduced into natural phenomena that physics can explain. For instance, um, we cannot reduce what's good to what brings us happiness, or what's good to sort of to what is what society considers what most people actually no that's not a good example, but yeah, we cannot reduce what's good natural into natural terms such as happiness, right? Those, dopamine or stuff like that. What's good is simply what's good. Like, yellow, right? You can explain the color yellow um, physically with, wavelength and, those physical properties, but yellow is more than just its corresponding wavelength physically. There is something more to yellow than its physical explanation. The same goes with goodness, right? Goodness, more famously argues, is essentially is sort of analogous in a sense to the color yellow. Now, Parfit takes this as true, and he persuaded Singer to be a non-naturalist, normative objectivist. So in section one, Parfit does not really endorse a particular normative ethics theory. He simply goes on to show the different problems of different theories. Um, Now, what Parfit really argues here that is similar to Singer starting from essentially in the 1980s, I think. That's when he published his Practical Ethics uh, and other papers, um, in which he sort of argues with a more Kantian metaphysics uh, of morals. Now, he was saying that his metaethical view. Now, I think what Kant means by the metaphysics of morals is really metaethics, right? That's what Kant is saying. Now, of course, Dworkin later rejects this, saying that it is a mistake to sort of generalize and not generalize but to say that metaethics is fundamentally a metaphysical subject, right? Rather, Dworkin thinks that metaethics theories themselves are also first order normative, um, substantive normative ethics. So he sort of reverses the grounding, and I think that's sort of what's pioneering about Dworkin. Now, returning to Kant and Singer, they really hold similar views, although their normative ethics theory is obviously very different. Kant being a what we call a deontologist, saying that there are things that are categorically wrong, regardless of the specific scenario, and of course, regardless of the consequence of doing the particular action. Now, Singer is a preference utilitarian, so he is saying that we really should maximize utility. It's just that this utility we could sort of represent it by the preference of people. So most people prefer most people prefer apples over pears. So you know that sort of guides our action given this preference. But their meta-ethical views are quite similar in the sense that they both think that um, there should be, the well, they both their normative ethics reasoning are both grounded in both of their normative ethics reasoning are grounded in their meta-ethical view. That is, that given that there is objective moral truth, given that the nature of ethics is to figure out what an um, impartial, rational adjudicator would say on a specific action, right? Should I do this? Right? Is it permissible, impermissible, should or shouldn't, obligatory, right? To do this action. Well, what would the impartial, rational adjudicator say? Well, that's what really what ethics is all about, they argue. Now, given that they think this way, they they go on to claim that, what follows most naturally from this nature of ethics must then be the correct normative ethics theory. Now, Parfit agrees with this. So yeah, so the notion of impersonal ethics runs throughout this book, Reasons and Persons. Now, part two focuses on the relationship between rationality and time. So, answering questions, or rather at least dealing with questions such as, should I do something I'll regret later, even if it seems a good idea now? Should we take into account our past desires? Now, um, his main purpose in this part is to argue against self-interest theory. Self-interest theories consider the differences between different persons to be extremely important, but do not consider the differences between the same person at different times to be important at all. Now, Parfit argues that this makes self-interest theory vulnerable to attack from two directions. It can be compared to morality on one side and present aim theory on the other. Parfit argues that our present aims can sometimes conflict with our long-term self-interest. Arguments that self-interest theorists uses to explain why it is irrational to act on such aims can be turned against the self-interest theorist and used as arguments in favor of morality. Conversely, arguments that self-interest theorists uses against morality could also be used as arguments in support of present aim theory. Now, part three is what many people consider really important about this publication, arguing for a sort of a reductive account of personal identity. Now, um, so essentially, he says that at time one there is a person, at later time two there is a person. These people, they seem to be the same person. Well, sure, these people indeed share memories and personality traits, but there are no further facts in the world that would make them the same person. So yeah, he essentially concludes that, well, similar to David Hume, he concludes that um, though it does not restrict itself to a mere okay, so he concludes that society um must protect the individual's future self from from being harmed. Why is that? Well, it seems that it is morally wrong for one person to harm another, um, and that it is obligatory on society to protect individuals from these um, harms by others. Now, given that at time A we're this person and at later time B we are a different person, well then it should also um, follow that it is society's duty to protect um, this person, me, right now in time A, to from harming potentially harming myself from harming myself, not myself but harming the sort of the future version of myself in time B. So by this logic, but by this argument, um, uh, he claims that, for example, drug use could be classified as sort of uh, a violation of a right to health of my future self. So yeah, so right, so, um, right. So he just points that out. Now, part four is also quite important. It deals with our responsibility towards future generations. Now, the insight he has here is that there is a non-identity problem. So the problem is, given that the course of history drastically affects what people are are actually born, one sec. Well, so the course of history drastically affects, you know, like what people are actually born, right? So for instance, if the course of history was such that I would be instead of being born in June, I would have been born in August, right? Now, I would not be Henry. I would not be I will likely not be wearing this shirt. I will likely not. Well, I would totally just not be me, right? It would not be me who is who's me. I would not exist. Instead, um, there might exist some person Jack or some person Hank, right? So even this time difference, makes a large difference when it comes to who is actually born and therefore who actually exists. Now, um, bum, 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 bum. Now, so the question here is, do future persons, um, are they justified in maybe complaining about our action, right? For example, complaining about global warming, because, well, if global warming, continues and deteriorates, um, some people will likely be born, and if these people, I mean, if these people are born after a severe sort of period of I don't know, global warming that maybe, I don't know, crushes the economy, crushes the natural environment, crushes biodiversity, pollution stuff, right? Those bad things. Now, these people born in that time, are they justified in complaining about our action? Well, Parfit worries that they actually don't. They actually are not justified in complaining about our actions because they would not have existed. They would not have existed if not for global warming, our current actions. Um, so yeah, it seems like, if I am born only because some person, some global warming happened, or some, I don't know, like some bad events, right? Do I have a right to complain about the bad event that may have the bad event? Well, part of the worry is that no, because um, well, assuming that my existence is worth living, I should in fact maybe thank them, right? Part of the worries um, for their bad action. Now, this is called the non-identity problem, and personally, I sort of I want to suggest a possible way out of this. Well, in the sense that, these bad actions, they actually do harm the present generations. Uh, they would likely harm, like, they are paradigmatic examples of harming current generations. For example, global warming, pollution, decreased biodiversity. Surely they also harm the current generation. So perhaps the criticism towards, these bad actions really are centered first of all in on their effect on the current generation. So maybe that sort of resolves the problem somewhat, or at least relieves it somewhat. Um, so another problem he sort of suggests is the mere addition paradox, leading to a conclusion which he calls repugnant. So essentially, this mere addition of utility would mean that it is better for 10 billion people to have a life barely worth living than 1 million or 10 million people having very high standards of living and profit. And Parfit considers this problematic, repugnant, absurd, intuitively absurd. So, um, but he has not yet found a solution. So yeah, that's a brief introduction. Um, my take, of course, my quite naive take of Reasons and Persons by Derek Parfit. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you'll enjoy the book too. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your time.